How's it going, everybody? This is Rob Novakast back with another video, and with this one we'll be talking about Anita Sarkeesian targeting a game that's coming out, 6 Days in Fallujah, as well as her dishonesty towards the publisher Victura. Hopefully I said that correctly. Now, I guess if anything, in case people have not heard of Anita Sarkeesian or 6 Days in Fallujah, we should probably give some context. So, I guess to start, we should talk about 6 Days in Fallujah. Now, 6 Days in Fallujah is a game that's based on the events that occurred in Fallujah, or the battles in Fallujah, and has been in development since, I believe, 2009. But due to a lot of people feeling that it was too soon to the events of what happened in Fallujah, the game itself has been to an extent in development limbo. And now it seems like they've decided, after time has passed, to go ahead and finish development and release the game. And at this point, the publisher is Victura, or Victura. Hopefully I said that name correctly. For those who know the correct pronunciation, let me know in the comments. Now, let's go on to talking about Anita, and oh boy, there is a lot to talk about with this individual, but I think I'm just going to give the cliff notes for what this person is. This person is the host of Feminist Frequency. This person is an individual that not only is a perpetual liar, but also is a con artist and has profited off of the feminist movement, and has repeatedly been dishonest about a variety of different media, mostly targeting video games when it comes down to representation and so on. In fact, due to her, and I'm using quotes here, influence, she has repeatedly bullied a variety of different publishers to try to become a consultant and ruin a few games. One in particular, which is one of my favorite franchises, being Last of Us Part 2. So, yeah. Anita Sarkeesian, not the best person when it comes down to, discussing a medium that, by the way, she herself says she has never understood at all. But anyway, there's an article on bounding into comics, which I'll leave a link in the description for you guys, which is titled Anita Sarkeesian Targets 6 Days in Fallujah and Lies About the Publisher Victura. And it discusses how Anita Sarkeesian is the host of Feminist Frequency and had targeted the up-and-coming video game 6 Days in Fallujah and the publisher. Speaking with IGN's Republic Valentine, Sarkeesian lied about the game and the publisher. Now, Anita Sarkeesian, who is described by Valentine as a critic and as a person connected to Fallujah via family, with her parents born and raised in Iraq and other relatives who were working in Fallujah during the war, which told to Valentine. It's not political. I'm using quotes, by the way. It's not political. Is used primarily by creators who are resistant to calls for a more representative video games landscape.
Damn it, Wade!
She was then quoted that it's a defense most often used to push the most aggressive, conservative, and oppressive narratives. Which, you gotta love when people say stuff like that, like Anita Sarkeesian, and for the most part never gives real context as to what they're talking about, especially when it comes down to video games. Continuously makes blanket statements and shows no references whatsoever. Though funny enough, going further with the article, it talks about how Victura never described their game as, using quotes here, not political. It was Polygon who ran a headline reading 6 Days in Fallujah, not trying to make a political commentary, creator says. It goes on to say, or at least the article, in the actual article, Peter Temte, hopefully I said that name correctly, the top dog at Victura, explained, using quotes, or using the quotes in the article, for us as a team, it is really about helping players understand the complexity of urban combat. It's about the experiences of that individual that is now there because of political decisions. Tom Tane in the article continues by saying, I don't think players are going to be confused about the cost of war. I don't think that they're going to walk away from this experience going, we need more war. I don't think that's something that the Marines and soldiers want as a message. I don't think that's something that the Iraq civilians want as a message. I think people do need to understand the human cost of war. Which, if I could chime in for a second, in between, reading the article or kind of giving some of the bullet points, I think that is, from what it sounds like, that is like the biggest, that's the biggest message when it comes down to the game. Which I may end up purchasing it just to see for myself. But I think that might be the biggest message, is the fact that, war itself comes at a cost. And in some sense, there is no, winner or loser in that situation. Everybody's a loser in that situation. Because everybody loses lives. And it's, you have everybody else wondering at what cost did people have to go to war for, of these reasons that they came here. Makes no sense. But I think ultimately from what for that last bit where he says, I think people need to understand the human cost of war. I think that's the biggest message for the game itself. At least that's what it's sounding like. Now, following Polygon's misleading headline, Victura, I think I said that time correctly, would eventually issue a statement reiterating Temte's original comments found within the article. Their tweet reads, or they posted a tweet which read, we understand the events recreated in the 6 Days in Fallujah are inseparable from politics. On screen is the tweet as well as the statement that they posted, which reads, 6 Days in Fallujah. We understand the events recreated in 6 Days in Fallujah are inseparable from politics. Here's how the game gives voice to a variety of perspectives. The story in 6 Days in Fallujah are told through gameplay and documentary footage featuring service members and civilians with diverse experiences and opinions about the Iraq War. So far, 26 Iraqi civilians and dozens of service members have shared the most difficult moments of their lives with us, so we can share them with you in their words. The documentary segments discuss many tough topics, including the events and political decisions that led to the Fallujah battles, as well as their aftermath. While we do not allow players to use white phosphorus as a weapon during gameplay, its use is described during the documentary segments. During gameplay, players will participate in stories that are given context through the documentary segments. Each mission challenges players to solve real military and civilian scenarios from the battle interactively, offering a perspective into urban warfare not possible through any other media. We believe the stories of this generation's sacrifices deserve to be told by the Marines, soldiers, and civilians who were there. We trust you will find the game, like the events it recreates, to be complex. Now, if you were to ask me, after reading this particular statement it seems like, or at least it sounds like, Victura is trying to be very respectful to the subject matter, as well as it seems like, discussing the or bringing up the not just documented footage, but also the testimonies between the Iraqi civilians and the soldiers that were involved. So in a sense, it seems like they're trying to give some respect, or at least as much respect as they can, to everyone that's involved. And at the very least, kind of bring up the fact that, at least what I was talking about earlier, or at least what was discussed in the article, which that being the human cost of war, like what goes through the acts of committing war towards each other. Now, unfortunately, Anita Sarkeesian didn't like this. She would react to the statement, telling the activist IGN. By the way, in case people are wondering why I'm calling IGN activists, is because there's a particular reason, which I'll go into near the end. But she reacts to the statement with activist IGN claiming, in quotes, "The recent statement with Victura articulating that they understand that 6 Days in Fallujah is in fact a political game is nothing more than crisis management." Oh, give me a fucking break. Yeah, she literally says that. Whether they actually understand the problems or not. And I guess she continued by saying that it doesn't matter what the developers who worked on the game for many years worked on it while believing they were not making a political game. In the article, it shows a tweet from Victura where they say that for hashtag 6 Days Game, coordinate as a team to face the challenges of Fallujah. And this was made in February 16, 2021. Though, all that aside, you gotta take into account that going back, that's not what the developers were saying, especially when it comes to politics in games, or this particular game. In fact, to quote, the developer Tamte again, they clearly say, using their quotes, "For us as a team, it is really about helping players understand the complexity of urban combat. It's about the experiences of that individual and is now there because of political decisions. And we do want to show how choices that are made by policymakers affect the choices that a Marine needs to make on the battlefield, just as that Marine cannot second guess the choices by the policymakers. We're not trying to make a political commentary about whether or not war itself is good or a bad idea." But then goes into talking about, the necessary, the cost. I almost said necessary, but the cost of war, or the human cost of war. In the article, it shows a tweet from the Game Developers, which shows an image of a Sergeant Garcia, and it reads that each mission in 6 Days of Fallujah is narrated by a real person, while you experience these same moments as if you were there, including Sergeant Garcia. So, hold on. So, here's my issue with this, especially with Anita Sarkeesian's statement, because she's trying to make it out like it's just from the perspective of the soldiers. Which, by the way, looking at that tweet, it says, narrated by real people. And they've already stated that they've gotten commentary or pretty much interviews from not just the soldiers, but Iraqi civilians. So I'm not understanding the issue here. Unless she's trying to make it out that's the only people we're going to get this story from, which is the American soldiers, which, according to Victura, that's not going to be the case. So I feel like she's grasping for straws at this point when it comes down to trying to claim that, we're only, hearing the side of the heroes. when that's not the fact. Especially since, again, the developers have claimed that we're hearing from both sides. Which, I have to reply, when it comes to that, it doesn't help that when it comes to, radical sex in terms of, Muslim religion and, just in those general areas, we have, a variety of different people that claim death to America, as well as, individuals who, by the way, you'd think that you'd be against, considering you support not just feminism, but the LGBTQ people allegedly shown throwing gay men off of tall buildings, crucifixions, as well as stoning women to death. Which, by the way, I will leave a link in the description for the article that I found that on, in case people forgot about it. Because, yeah. By the way, that honestly makes, Anita's article, or at least sentiment, look really bad. Especially since, again, when it comes down to her talking about, how people are portrayed, and you see stuff like that, it looks really, really bad on her part, especially for the people that she supposedly is supposed to be representing. But she then continues, like, if we're going through the article, continues by saying that, talk about building empathy. Where are stories about Arabs living their lives, loving sports, mastering a musical instrument, falling in love, finding comfort in their religious or spiritual faith, rebelling against their parents, cooking with their grandparents? Where are the stories that show the very wide array of cultures and countries that we lump into the word Arab? For which I have to reply, and I think a lot of people know what I'm going to say. Why don't you make that story? Why don't you create, or at least, actually, if anything, probably guilt a writer to create for you, instead of trying to shoehorn your own beliefs into another person's work of art? Because that's really what we're talking about, is somebody's work of art that you're trying to force yourself into, and trying to put, or at least force, your perspective in. Because let's face it, whether it be books, reading, or basically books, comic books, TV shows, movies, music, video games, etc., heck, even general art, it's all subjective. And at this point, especially when it comes to art, this is my biggest stance on it. Let people create what they want to create. If you don't like it, okay, that's fine. Walk away. But in a sense, it looks bad on you when you're trying to force your ideals onto somebody else, trying to claim that, oh, their art is bad. Let me do, or force my opinions to make it better. Because, in a sense, that's not art. It's just you forcing your opinions, your ideas. If everybody thinks the same, then nobody is creative. But anyway, she continues by saying that, in tandem with narrative media villainizing Arabs, the news media spent decades justifying attacks in the Middle East, so much so that Americans were already primed to accept the 2003 invasion of Iraq as if it was a just, moral, and inevitable action to take. Which, that was how Anita concluded her statement. Which, just so you are aware, a lot of people were not for the attacks or the war in Iraq, Iran, just in the Middle East, just in general. even when I was a younger kid, when this was all going on, I was not for this. I didn't think it was necessary. Me, a little kid, thinking that this wasn't necessary, and I couldn't understand as to why we were, wasting our time with this. Why we are, causing so much issues, or at least why everyone was causing so much issues towards each other. Heck, repeatedly, during, all these events, I've had to, hear of my dad freaking going, and by the way, he's a medic. He was an army medic. He had to repeatedly go into these skirmishes and not just, mend the people on the US side, but also the civilians, the Iraqis, the Arabs, everyone in the Middle East. So to an extent, this all in all, like, this was, especially when it comes down to, and I'll say it, I'll be the one to say it, because of George W. Bush, that fucking idiot, declaring war for no reason whatsoever. We had, many people going to war for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And it's something that, honestly, shouldn't have happened whatsoever. The only reason that it did happen, and me personally, I'm not afraid to say it, it's because at that point, George W. Bush, because there was no reason to do it, all he wanted to be was a war president. Plain and simple. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that one. So, above all, especially when it comes down to Anita Sarkeesian and her radical views, as well as going into and trying to push her narrative towards the activists, Polygon, and IGN. And in case people are wondering why, because I said I would talk about it near the end, why I'm calling IGN and even Polygon activists, is because at this point, especially when it comes to news journalism, when it comes to gaming or just in general, it's biased. And it's only pushing their point of view and their thought process, instead of being just completely and utterly even when it comes down to the topic. Being very subjective, or at least not subjective, but just, I guess, morally down the middle. So when I see journalism from IGN or Polygon at this point, it's not journalism. It's activism. No way in or out about it. So at this point, especially when it comes down to, what they say or do, or what they say about a variety of different topics, I think to an extent I can't take it fully seriously, especially since, again, it is very biased. So, in the end, the article discusses how this game is going to be coming out later this year for PC and consoles. I myself am probably going to go check it out because it sounds interesting, to say the least. Especially since we get, again, because it talks about how we get the narrative from both the soldiers and the civilians. So, what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Do you think Anita Sarkeesian is right on what she had to say? Do you think she was being morally dishonest about the intentions of the game developers? Let me know in the comments. And if you guys can also like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. If you guys want to follow us on social media, links are in the description down below, as well as check out our daily content and the weekly podcast. With that being said, this is Rob Novakast signing off. Have a good one, and take care. Peace.